Hello, welcome back to the Cricket Nerds. All of the boys are back to talk about the latest and greatest in the Cricket World Cup. We know the 4 teams that are qualifying. We know who's looking strong, who isn't. That's basically what we're going to talk about today. We'll also talk a little bit about England, because that's the team we support. They've had an absolute stinker, but they kind of showed that they're not all terrible at playing cricket, which is kind of what we were starting to think, against 2 pretty poor teams. But there we go. Let's crack on. I think we just do a little strength rating on all the 4 teams that are qualified. There's only 1 game left in the group stage. We'll probably do a podcast tomorrow about that, because it'll be probably an absolute India thrashing of Netherlands.
Let's not promise things we can't deliver on.
Well, no. We can do it. So, first of all, let's talk about New Zealand, because they started off really strong. They've tailed off quite a lot towards the end. Interestingly, they have lost against Australia, South Africa, and India. So they haven't beaten... And Pakistan. So they haven't beaten any of the strong teams, and Pakistan. But what they have done effectively is bashed all of the minnows. And I'm including England in that minnow bashing.
Yes.
They've won the games that they should have won, bar Pakistan, really. And you know, they've lost the others. So, but they do have a good record in semi-finals. So how do we think New Zealand stack up?
Well, I think it's been classic New Zealand, really, in terms of they've played sensible cricket and it's worked. I mean, looking at some of their players like Rachin Ravindra has really stood out to me as an up-and-comer. Looks really strong. They're missing out on, I guess, Kane Williamson being there. But I think that Lockie Ferguson, the way he bowled against Sri Lanka, looked really good, and that sort of confidence for him going into the knockout stages will be big for them. But in terms of how they stack up versus looking at how well South Africa have played, seeing how well Australia are playing at the moment, they've won 7 in a row. India look unbeatable. I definitely see them as the weakest of the 4 teams, and I can't see them winning a semi-final against India, which is probably what they're going to have. And when you look at their game against Pakistan, if they'd managed to play I know it's a big if, but playing the full 50 overs, I just see New Zealand's experience coming through and Pakistan making a few mistakes and them not being able to chase down 400.
Yeah, for sure.
For
sure. I think with what we've seen with New Zealand, and if you've not been keeping up with the World Cup, the other semi-finalist teams are Australia, South Africa, and India. Is the games that they have lost. I mean, I'm not really going to include that Pakistan one, because I feel like it was some real weird Duckworth Lewis stuff that caused them to lose that game. And I think New Zealand would have come back to win that game, because it seemed to only be Fakhar Zaman who was leading the charge for Pakistan. But if we look at the South Africa and India game, I think that in both of those, New Zealand were just light on runs and didn't apply themselves. I think especially against India, they were potentially like a 20 or so runs short. Darryl Mitchell played an outstanding knock supported by Ranchan Ravindra, but I think the bit that they really lacked was a lower order cameo. And some of the other games that they've won, they've had those cameos. I mean, if you look at the 400 score they put up against Pakistan, yeah, they had a massive score at the top from Ravindra, but Phillips and Santner both chimed in with the bat at the end. Whereas against New Zealand and South Africa, actually, South Africa, they just got completely outclassed by the bowling of South Africa. But against the India game, they just were a few runs light. And it took a really, match-winning knock from Virat Kohli to get them over the line there. I would like to know what we learned from that Australia game, though, because, I mean, that, for me, was one of the best games in the World Cup so far. With
Australia versus New Zealand.
Yeah. Where I think it was about 5 runs in it or something, and it came down to the last ball or something. because again, it was a similar thing where their lower order didn't quite fire off, and it was all on Jimmy Neesham to get them over the line. I don't know. What do you think about that one, James?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about it at the time, and it was the first like really really good game because it was the last ball finish and all that. But we did learn that there was obviously that was when Australia started their rise. They suddenly found their form and they were ascending. New Zealand, it was sort of the beginning of their little dip. But it was a strong performance from both teams, and not necessarily with the ball because it was a very good track, but it was very strong with the bat from both teams. And I think it showed that if they apply themselves, all of those teams can score a 400 and then defend it. And that's going to be the big test for India because it's all been group stages so far. India, since like the 5th game, they haven't actually had a big pressure game. Like the pressure's been off. Pretty much knew they were through. So it'll be interesting how they play in a crunch match. This was the test that we wanted to see from India right from the start, was if they end up batting first, can they, really apply themselves? Trent Bolt takes a couple in the first over. How are India gonna go? Like, are they gonna end up staying aggressive, trusting the team and putting up 400? Or are they going to shut down shop? Are they going to get 320 or not even that, to 270? And can they defend it? Probably is the answer, but I don't think it's as much of a walkover as we think it could be.
Yeah.
So should we move on to a next team, to the next team? And I think India is probably the easiest segue to make because they're so strong. Like, even though they lost Hardik Pandya, if you can even remember that, then Mohammad Shami came in. They haven't missed the batting, and he has bowled incredibly. He has been one of the best bowlers in the World Cup. So India we already knew that their squad depth was unreal, but they're proving it time and time again. And they don't look like losing a game, do they?
No, I think they will look very strong and will put a performance in against the Netherlands tomorrow as we record this. They've looked like they're just unbeatable the whole time. Everyone is firing. They seem to be the only team that's figured out how to bowl seam. My only worry for India is the track record of bottling it in knockout matches. Like, it would be the biggest upset in this World Cup if come Friday, I think next week, New Zealand beat India in that semi-final. Like, it will be just such an upset if that happens. Yeah, they've looked in complete control the whole way through. Even when they lost Hardik Pandya, they haven't needed his all-rounderness because everyone has just been performing fantastically. Like, they've not needed the extra batting because Mohammad Shami's been great. Although he came in for Takur anyway, but they do just look unbeatable. My only concern about their team is actually, can they come over their demons of always bottling it when it comes down to the knockout stage?
Yeah, I think the way that would happen is if a team bats first, scores over 300, and then you take early wickets against India in their innings, put the batsman under pressure. I think that's the way to do it, because really the one who is good at finishing games when the team's under pressure, for India, that's Kohli and Hardik Pandya. And obviously Hardik Pandya isn't in at this point in time. And if Kohli gets out cheaply, like he did against England, there is every possibility that would happen. Then that will put India that will put them under pressure, really. When you look at how well their bowlers have done, that's the thing which is the standout. That's the thing that's going to win them the tournament. I mean, you look at the last 3 games, because they won their first 5 games, and you think, well, they're already through. And then they follow it up by bowling England out for less than 150, bowling Sri Lanka out for less than 60. And then they come against South Africa, who've probably been the best batting team aside from India throughout this entire tournament, bowl them out for 80 odd. I mean, like, this bowling side is ridiculous. They seem to be getting better game after game after game. And you put them in that knockout position, I just think there's every opportunity for them to do that again against New Zealand, who are relying on 1 or 2 players, really. So yeah, I can see India doing very well.
Let's talk about Australia, because they started off cold. They've heated up tremendously, and there have been a few standout performances. Really, really big knocks from a couple of players that we haven't covered yet. So there was obviously Glenn Maxwell's double hundred, and that was unreal. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
Yeah.
I was out of the country at the time, so I couldn't watch it. So I had to watch like highlights, and there were so many highlights because everything he was doing, it was so easy for him. It looked like he was playing real cricket 23 on easy mode. It was just,
it was stick cricket, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, switch hits and slogs, and it was like everything was off the middle of the bat, which was incredible. And so he's obviously in decent form, and he was rested in this last game, a game that happened today. And Mitchell Marsh has just produced one of the great knocks of the World Cup as well, with 177 not out at a strike rate of 134, 9 sixes and 17 fours, which was outstanding. Steve Smith looked good as well. So it feels like the batting's coming on very nicely. The bowling is always there or thereabouts for Australia. What do we think, boys? How strong do the Aussies look?
It's a weird one with the Australian team because they have won the last 7 games. They've gone on a really good streak, but they have relied on a couple players here or there to kind of get them through. I mean, against England, if England hadn't came into this tournament batting as well as they have done leading into the tournament or at the previous World Cup, then England should have beaten Australia because Australia didn't score too many runs. And they're really relying on Glenn Maxwell, on Mitchell Marsh, on David Warner to score them the runs at a good pace. Because as good as Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne are, they're not match winners in the World Cup. I've not seen them win a match single-handedly for Australia this World Cup. So in order to produce that innings which is going to beat a team like India, you are relying on those 1 or 2 players. Bowling wise, though, I think they're very strong. Aside from India's pace bowling, Australia have probably been second best with the way Mitchell Starc's bowled. Pat Cummins as well has provided some good performances, as well as Josh Hazlewood. They're all performing as we knew they would.
Yeah.
It's just that spinning option. Is Adam Zampa going to continue that form? In how are India going to play Adam Zampa? For me, that's the key.
This is the thing for me with Australia, because I think that, they've had some great batting performances and some individuals have really stood up and been counted in those games. Like, as you've said, we've seen big hundreds from Warner, Marsh, and also from Maxwell. But for me, the real standout performer for Australia has been Adam Zampa. He has been, for me, the difference. If you look at Australia and New Zealand, for example, and how their World Cup campaigns have been different, it's because New Zealand haven't had that world-class spin option. I'll always back Mitch Santner to the last days. Mitch Santner is just such a class with his left arm spin, but he isn't quite on that Adam Zampa level. He's not on that leg spin level that we've got. And I'm sorry to say it, but Ish Sodhi is just not quite up to the same level as Adam Zampa. If you look at the start of the tournament, when Australia lost those first 2 games, their seamers weren't performing very well. Hazlewood, Cummins, and Starc all weren't doing very well at all. And it's only really been Mitchell Starc has somehow found a way to bowl in the same way that the Australian seamers have. And Pat Cummins and Josh Hazlewood have had to sort of reinvent themselves as middle-order cutter bowlers. Yeah, we've seen a bit of Hazlewood, at the top of the innings. But if you look at where he's got his wickets, it's either been at the death with slower balls or in those middle overs. So the seamers have really had to adapt their approach on these Indian pitches. And for me, that difference has been Adam Zampa. And to get past South Africa, which is going to be the other semi-final game that we're going to have on Wednesday, I think that all they need to do is just if South Africa, if Australia, it's the other way around actually. Australia and South Africa is on Thursday, but if they can just go and play, have a good game from Zampa, and one of the batters get some runs, I think they're going to give South Africa a really good game. Africa, if you've got this far, remember, if you want to continue to support the channel, become a member. If you've got this far, the button is down below. You get cool emojis that James edited onto a podcast a few times ago. I've already got too much editing to do with Zach's camera falling off, so that isn't going to be on this podcast. But if you want to continue to support the channel, you're already supporting by watching. But tell your friends, and if you really want to, become a member. James, back to the podcast.
So South Africa, they looked incredibly strong the whole time, especially when they're batting first. And if we kind of preview the game against Australia and how they might perform there, they batted first last time. Quinton de Kock got a ton. Everybody else just kind of chipped in, and they really beat Australia with the ball. They absolutely rinsed them. And something I've noticed is that Australia, weirdly enough, they struggle more against the high-paced bowlers bowling back of a length. Even though you'd think that's what they're used to, that tends to work the best. Like Mark Wood performs well against Australia because he hits the deck hard and he hits it back of a length. And South Africa have got the players to do that. They've got Kagiso Rabada. They've got Lungi Ngidi, as long as he's not too injured. I'm not sure how he is after that last game. And Marco Jansen, who has been my player of the tournament, I think. So with that bowling attack, which is so strong, I think that they give themselves a very, very good chance of winning. Again, I just can't write South Africa off at all. And then with the spin of Keshav Maharaj, who I think has bowled really, really well.
Yeah.
And I imagine they'll play Tabraiz Shamsi. It depends on the pitch. They could play Kutsia. But either one is a very, very good option. So South Africa look super strong to me.
Yeah,
what do
sure.
you think?
It's just been that story of that top four. Like Quinton de Kock has just been scoring runs for fun. Reza Hendricks came back into the side when Temba Bavuma got injured and looked like he'd never been away. And then we know what Heinrich Klaasen can do, and the fact that he can just come and just smash it around and score a whole bunch of runs is just so good for them. Rassie van der Dussen too. He's come back into form in a big way in this tournament. I think sometimes he just doesn't look like he's going to ever get out. So yeah, that top four, if Bavuma's going to stay fit for the semi-final game, whether they play Bavuma or whether they play his name has just completely gone out of my head, Reza Hendricks, it's a really strong top four. And I think those four, what's going to be really key for me is the toss. If South Africa bat first, I would back them to win that game. Because I really think that in the first 10 overs, that top four are going to really put the Australian seam attack to the sword. And it's going to be how they can battle back. And if they can keep Adam Zampa off, if they can cause Adam Zampa to have a bad game, I can see South Africa scoring 400 and then bowling Australia and then restricting Australia. Zach, how do you think South Africa can win that semi-final?
I think batting first is obviously very key because South Africa struggle with chasing, and we've seen that in the tournament. However, saying that, I mean, South Africa, Australia World Cup semi-finals and finals are always great to watch. They've always shown some really good games, and the pressure will be on both teams really to deliver. But for South Africa, the key is that top order making runs, because if the Australian bowlers learn from the Indian bowlers and keep Quinton de Kock quiet, bowl Adam Zampa through those middle overs, as India did with Jadeja and Kuldeep Yadav, that South Africa batting lineup can be vulnerable to some top bowling. It's just whether South Africa can get over the difficult periods and then capitalise. And I think they've got the mindset to be able to do that when they're batting first. But when they're batting second, that's when we start to see the wheels come off a bit, and the panic station set in. They did really well to get get over the line against Pakistan. So if Australia set them a score of, say, 250 plus, South Africa are going to struggle there. However, saying that, I think South Africa have the bowling attack to be able to cause issues for Australia. And if Australia do bat first, South Africa will be looking to restrict them to a score below 250. So they'll feel confident chasing it down. But yeah, it's looking like it's going to be really good semi-finals. I'm very excited. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Before we finish then, let's have a good old complaint about how bad England have been. And how in the last 2 games they've seemed to remember how to play cricket against Pakistan, they're definitely the strongest team that England have beaten, and a relatively weak Netherlands side. James, you kick us off. What's gone wrong, and why have England won these last 2 games?
What's gone wrong is probably a completely separate video for another time. I'm not sure I can diagnose that as easily as that, but I think what's gone right this time is Ben Stokes. He's the only one that seems to be able to soak up pressure and then apply himself in the right situations. And it seems like the other players have started to kind of learn from him a little bit. They've figured out that actually just throwing your bat in a very half-hearted manner doesn't work. That isn't how you score lots of runs. And every team that's successful, even the ones that are absolutely blasting 400 runs in an innings, they're nurdling it around in the middle overs. It's the way to do it. And England were so incapable of doing it, but they actually figured it out this time. So that for me was the difference. The bowling, I think they finally figured out some in-form bowlers a little bit. Adil Rashid kind of started to figure it out a bit. David Willey, it's a shame that he's retiring because, or it's a shame just how he's been used over his career, really, because he is, he could have been a genuine all-rounder for England in a different lifetime, I think. But he's been performing with the ball. Gus Atkinson, I've been quite impressed with. It's good to see them playing some future players in Atkinson and Brooke. But yeah, just application and being a bit more sensible. A few too many run-outs for my liking, but overall, that's what I'd say is the difference. I don't know about you, Zach.
Well, I just wanted to mention David Willey because he's retiring from international cricket, and given how well he's bowled, given his experiences in the IPL and playing 2020 cricket in the Blast as well, he's had more opportunities than all the other England players to actually have that, given he doesn't play Test cricket and hasn't always been part of the setup. But his experience and the way he's bowled this World Cup, I think it's a real shame that he's not going to be part of the 2020 World Cup next year. He'd be one of my first names on the list. So yeah, it's a shame. But given that, I think that England haven't played well, have they, really? And seeing how they played today shows you how poorly they have played. I mean, you look at how the first couple overs against Pakistan today, Pakistan were bowling really well. They were bowling really good lengths. They were getting the ball to talk. And David Malan and Johnny Bairstow, they didn't seem like they wanted to go on the attack. They didn't seem like they were being bogged down by Pakistan. They were just riding the storm. The storm ended, and they ended up getting the best power play we've had in this whole World Cup. And that just shows the difference between playing on a flat pitch in England or Pakistan versus playing on a tricky pitch in India. And it's shown. Like, you look at the South African innings that they played, there's a massive learning thing there for England, and it's a shame they haven't been able to adapt. However, we've inserted a bit more pride, haven't we?
Yeah,
with winning 2 games.
I've actually got a question based on what you just said. So it looked like the most difficult bowling period, like the first sort of 6 overs. They were getting it to move all around. It was beating the edge so many times. But it was the first time, I think, that we've seen England just knuckle down, not try and just throw the bat weakly into the channel.
Yeah.
But stay quite compact and then punish the balls that actually need punishing. Do we think that the bowling that England have faced so far in the power play before that, in the previous 8 games, was too easy? Do you think that it was just
They
too obviously easy for England and they just capitulated so much? Because I don't know if the bowling was that amazing against
they just
England.
weren't applying themselves. The real difference was Bairstow didn't get himself out in the first 10 overs. Like every single game so far, Bairstow has got himself out in the first 10 overs doing something absolutely stupid. Look at Australia trying to nibble it down the leg side first ball. The fact that he stayed there until the 20th over meant that they could actually build a partnership. That he said there till the 20th partnership, but we didn't lose a wicket till after the power play, meant that Joe Root can bed in and do what he does best. And, you know, all the stats about Joe Root not succeeding very well during the power play, it showed dividends today. And the fact that this in the World Cup was the first game that England did not lose a wicket between the 20th and the 40th over speaks volumes. Like, we've been saying this the whole time, like in that tricky middle overs period, just knuckle down, nerdle it around. And they did that, and they got an over 100-run partnership and didn't lose a wicket. And it set them that platform to then hit another over 100 runs in the last 10 overs. It was just the pacing that England should have played the whole way through the tournament, and it's taken them to the very last game. I don't know if that's because the pressure was off for them now or whatever it was, but yeah, it's just so frustrating.
I do want to mention Joss Butler though, because he's had a shocking tournament. But when I had a look at the stats from 2019, and Joss Butler, all but one game, where England won, Joss Butler came in to bat after the 30th over. And when we think about the amazing innings that Joss Butler's played in one-day international cricket, it's when he's come in with not long left in the game. England have an okay score, and he scored a really quick half century or a big century off not many balls to take England to that unreachable total. And that's something that England have missed out on in this tournament, is they haven't applied themselves, which means Joss Butler's been coming in way too early. And yes, he's a great player. Yes, he's England's captain, but he's there to score quick runs. That's his role in the team. You think about Dhoni for India. Dhoni never sent himself in too early, did he? And yeah, it made a difference today, having Joss Butler coming in toward the end, and
I think
it takes the pressure off him.
And I think we've seen how good Butler is when he's opening in T20s, and there have been some questions as to whether he should open in ODIs, but I think, you know, just he needs to trust that 20 overs he can score an amazing, you know, innings, and you're right. They just need to apply themselves, and 20 overs is plenty for Butler to be able to take it away. You know, Moeen, you know, being down the order, but effectively in at 3 in 20 overs as well. Like, it could have been what could have been, eh? That's about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What could still be is you could subscribe to the Cricket Nerds. Join the members if you want to. It just supports us. It really helps us out. So thank you so much for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. Another podcast tomorrow. I'm committing right now. So yeah, just join the party. We're all about it. These two are looking less committed to tomorrow.
I'm ready.
I'm here for it.
We're doing it. Cricket Nerds are here. You're joining us. Thank you so much. Like, subscribe. Goodbye. Since like the sort of 4th, 5th game, the pressure's been off for India. They really haven't had it. Oh, Zach's fallen over. Unlucky, mate. But I'll carry on. Until the...
Keep going.
It's a bit too distracting. It's quite funny.
Nah,